Tonight, a stunning development in the case of the murdered Idaho college students. A plea deal for the man long accused of being the killer of 4 young people on their home late at night, a case that shocked the country. What we know about the deal. The showdown over President Trump's big, beautiful bill is on. The Senate voting on the president's massive spending bill. Critics in his own party are worried about cuts to Medicare and increasing the deficit.
No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, lower taxes for seniors, for Social Security recipients.
When Donald Trump says this bill won't cut Medicaid, he's lying. When he says this bill will grow the economy, he's lying.
The president's warning to Republicans about cost cutting. Diddy's fate to be decided. Jury deliberations are underway in the Sean Diddy Combs racketeering and sex trafficking trial. Jurors sent a note to the judge after just 70 minutes what it might signal in the early hours behind closed doors.
They're shot. Everybody's shot up here.
New details about the suspect in a deadly firefighter ambush. Police say he intentionally set a fire to lure first responders to the scene and started shooting. The dramatic images of a cruise ship rescue after a father desperately leapt into the waters to save his daughter. Expansion on the court. The latest cities getting WNBA teams and how soon you can see them play. And the devil's back. She's still wearing Prada. The new teaser trailer to the highly anticipated sequel to the classic film.
Oh, don't be ridiculous, Andrea. Everybody wants this.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is Prime with Lindsay Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We begin with a shocking turn in the University of Idaho murders case. Sources tell ABC News that the man accused of brutally killing 4 college students while they slept in 2022 has agreed to a plea deal. ABC News has also learned that Bryan Kohberger has agreed to plead guilty on all 4 counts of murder after pleading not guilty on months of delays. The deal closes one chapter for the victims' families who'd been preparing for a trial to start later this summer. Dave Arenberg is standing by, but let's get right to Kana Whitworth. Kana, what do you know about the deal?
Well, as you mentioned, Lindsay, just the news of this plea deal being accepted is simply stunning. But according to our sources, the plea deal itself is pretty cut and dry and basic. Bryan Kohberger will plead guilty to all counts on the indictment. So that's all 4 murder counts as well as burglary. Will agree to serve 4 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole, no possibility to make an appeal. And in all of this, I think the big question, Lindsay, is this justice for the families? Tonight, breaking news in the University of Idaho murder case. Sources telling ABC News the man accused of the brutal slaying of 4 college students, Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Kaylee Gonzalez, and Madison Mogan, has accepted a plea deal. According to sources, Bryan Kohberger will plead guilty to all 4 counts of murder and will be sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole and is waiving all rights to an appeal in this proposed deal. This is all in exchange for the death penalty to be taken off the table. In a letter provided to victims' families, the state will seek restitution, saying this resolution is our sincere attempt to seek justice for your family. But for every person involved, justice can look different.
Does justice lie in a conviction? I don't think there's going to ever be any justice.
I mean, yeah, we can have justice for the conviction of it, but I don't get to still hang out with Ethan. So
they still don't get to.
They don't have a son.
They
don't have a daughter anymore. So, is that justice? Probably not.
And Kana back with us now. Kana, a big shift in this case tonight. What's ahead now?
You know, Lindsay, it's moving incredibly fast. So now on Wednesday, there is a hearing scheduled. This will be a change of plea hearing. And then they do expect actual sentencing to happen later in July. Again, this is moving fast, a stunning development here in a case, Lindsay, that has gripped this nation.
And you have followed it from the very beginning for us. Kana Whitworth, our thanks to you. Joining us now for more is Dave Arenberg, the former state attorney for Palm Beach County. Thank you for joining us. So in that letter just mentioned in Kana Whitworth's story there, prosecutors said that the defense approached the state last week to ask for a plea deal offer. What might have led to this finally happening, especially so close to the trial?
Well, Lindsay, it was definitely a victory for the defense because there was a good chance that Kohberger was going to get the death penalty. And I'm a bit surprised that this deal was entered into, especially when you saw the reaction from the Gonzalez family who were outraged by it. They seem to be blindsided themselves by it. That's never a good look for prosecutors. So as far as what caused it, well, the judge ruled against the defense on a couple of key motions. They didn't let the defense have an additional delay. So that was a big deal. I think the defense said, I thought that they couldn't go to trial this quickly. And also, they didn't allow the defense to have a third-party culprit defense, which means to point the finger at some unknown real killer, which was always going to be bogus. But why did the prosecution enter into it? Perhaps that they've spoken to other victims' families and thought that they supported it. Perhaps they saw a trial that was going to last for months and decided just to get what they could, but I just think that it's not full justice because if anyone deserves the death penalty, it's this guy.
And how does the prosecution typically go about planning these plea deal offers and considering aspects like whether to take the death penalty off the table?
Well, generally they talk to the families, and the families would say what they want. Now, if 3 out of the 4 families, or most of them, supported this deal, then that's one thing. But the fact that the Gonzalez family was blindsided by it really is troubling. And as far as other questions, other considerations, well, they would say, how long is the trial? What are the chances at trial? Do we want to put the witnesses and the victims' families through a trial? There's all these considerations, but I see it as a former prosecutor that they got this guy dead to rights. They had his DNA on the scene. They have an eyewitness on the scene that said, yeah, the killer looks like that guy. They have the car that he drove. They have his phone records. They had him, and I think they would have gotten the death penalty. So I'm not sure why they entered into this deal. I'm surprised too, and I'm hoping we'll get answers.
Do families generally want to avoid trial?
Generally, they do, because in many cases, they get put through the ringer yet again. Now, one thing that could be good is that because of this plea deal, I would expect that Kohberger is required to admit everything and to explain things and to perhaps talk about what happened that night. Evidence and information the families would never have received if he just clammed up and went to trial. So maybe that's a good thing, but you know, we don't know. This is early. We don't know what's part of the plea deal, except that the death penalty is taken off the table. So in that sense, it's a win for the defense.
Dave Ehrenberg, our thanks to you. Really appreciate your time and insight.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Police have identified a suspect in the deadly firefighter ambush in Idaho that left 2 firefighters dead and a 3rd critically wounded. Tonight, we're learning new details about that suspect as authorities search for a possible motive behind the ambush. ABC's Matt Gutman reports from Idaho.
Tonight, authorities say the suspect who lured firefighters into that deadly ambush in Idaho may have dreamed of one day becoming a firefighter himself.
There is information that we've received that he at one time wanted to be a firefighter.
Late today, authorities identifying the suspect as 20-year-old Wes Rowley, releasing this image saying he deliberately started this wildfire in Canfield Mountain and Coeur d'Alene Sunday and then opened fire on first responders. 2 firefighters killed, a 3rd badly wounded. Authorities say the suspect actually interacted with the firefighters before the shooting. They'd asked him to move his vehicle.
The firefighters arrived on the scene, and his vehicle was pretty close to where the firefighters parked, and they asked him to move it, and there was some back and forth. We had to push that vehicle off the side of the mountain because we didn't want him to circle back and get in that vehicle and flee.
Tonight, the suspect's grandfather, Dale, saying he's heartbroken.
Nobody wants to think that their son or grandson is going to go do this. I feel more sad for the people that got killed than I do for him, simply because they didn't deserve it.
The horror unfolding around 1:21 p.m. Sunday afternoon, firefighters responding to a routine call-out for a brush fire near a popular trailhead. Crews racing right into a trap. By 2 p.m., 40 minutes later, gunfire and these panic calls began.
Right now, there's an active shooter zone. They're shot.
First responders realizing they are under attack.
We need law enforcement immediately. We've got 2 unresponsive battalion chiefs.
Frantic and taking cover.
I'm pinned down behind Battalion 1's rig. It's clear to me that this fire was set intentionally to draw us in.
Police exchanging gunfire with the suspect, later using cell phone data to pinpoint his location in a wooded area. And there, 6 hours later, authorities removing the suspect's body just as the wildfire closed in.
Is there an indication that he used that shotgun that was found beside him on himself?
Yes.
Overnight, police and firefighters in that solemn procession to honor their colleagues. And tonight, officials revealing both of the fallen firefighters were beloved battalion chiefs who could have retired but stayed on. Chief Frank Harwood was 42 and the father of two. Chief John Morrison with Coeur d'Alene Fire since 1996. And that third firefighter wounded, Dave Tisdale, is still in critical condition.
So heartbreaking. Matt, just give us a sense of how chaotic that scene was when they moved in to retrieve the bodies of the firefighters.
I was just talking to the sheriff, Lindsay, and around 3 p.m. they decided they had to go in to get those bodies. They couldn't allow the fire to burn over them. They needed to give them some dignity. So SWAT teams in Bearcats, which are those armored vehicles, moved in. They took fire from that suspect. Still, they managed to retrieve the body, but they were so concerned that the suspect would somehow wheel around and maybe steal one of the vehicles and get away that they decided to push his vehicle right off a cliff and then to cripple the firefighters' vehicles by taking out the tires and then shooting into the engine block. The sheriff also telling me that the suspect had no known criminal history, no ties to terrorism. And right now, they're still poring over his social media, Lindsay.
All right. Matt Gutman for us. Thanks so much, Matt. Tonight, the U.S. Senate is working late as Republicans try to push through President Trump's massive tax and spending bill. Some critics in his own party are defying the president, and once again, Elon Musk is working against this bill, threatening Republicans who vote for it. ABC's Mary Bruce is at the White House.
Tonight, Senate Republicans scrambling to push through the massive tax cuts and spending bill at the heart of President Trump's agenda.
Let's vote. This is good for America. This is good for the American people. It's good for working families.
The bill includes roughly $4 trillion in tax cuts for the wealthy, along with new funding for immigration enforcement, and fulfills some campaign pledges like no taxes on tips and overtime. It also guts Biden-era clean energy initiatives and slashes Medicaid, something Trump promised he would not do. A new estimate from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office predicts some 11.8 million Americans would lose their health coverage over the next decade.
It's the biggest Medicaid cut in history and represents the largest transfer of wealth in history. It is caviar over kids, hedge funds over health care.
Trump insists the Medicaid cuts only target waste, fraud, and abuse. But a member of his own party, Republican Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, says the president doesn't understand his own bill.
So what do I tell 663,000 people in 2 years or 3 years when President Trump breaks his promise by pushing them off of Medicaid because the funding's not there anymore, guys? In the White House, senators advising the president are not telling him that the effect of this bill is to break a promise.
Trump furious with Tillis, threatening to primary him, but Tillis refusing to cave, instead announcing he won't run for re-election, saying leaders who are willing to embrace bipartisanship, compromise, and demonstrate independent thinking are becoming an endangered species. Other Republicans alarmed by the bill's price tag, which by one estimate would add at least $3.3 trillion to the debt over the next 10 years. Tonight at the 11th hour, Elon Musk swooping in again, declaring every Congress member who votes yes should hang their head in shame, threatening they will lose their primary next year if it is the last thing I do on this earth.
Quite a curveball from Elon Musk there. Mary Bruce joins us now from the White House. So, Mary, where do things stand with the vote right now?
Well, Lindsay, Senate Republicans are hoping that they can pass this bill tonight. Reminder of the math here, they can only afford to lose 3 Republicans in the Senate and still pass this. And right now, more than that, remain undecided. And even if this does ultimately pass in the Senate, then the legislation goes back over to the House, where, as you know, Speaker Johnson has that razor-thin majority. And already we are hearing from some Republicans who are opposed to the changes that have been made in the Senate. But the White House is adamant President Trump wants this bill on his desk so he can sign it on the 4th of July. Lindsay.
And on another note, we know President Trump is expected to visit the site of a planned migrant detention center in the Florida Everglades tomorrow. They're calling it Alligator Alcatraz. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, the president tomorrow is going to be down in Florida attending the opening of this temporary migrant detention facility in southern Florida, dubbed Alligator Alcatraz for its remote location in the Everglades. The White House touting that, saying there's only one road in and it's surrounded by dangerous wildlife. It's expected to hold up to 5,000 people, and the White House says it underscores actually the need for Congress to go ahead and pass the so-called big beautiful bill here in Washington, because they say they need more funding so that they can open more detention facilities like this around the country. Lindsay.
All right, Mary Roos for us from the White House. Thanks so much, Mary.
Thank you.
We're joined now by Republican Senator Eric Schmick from Missouri. Senator, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. It's reported that you took your time to cast your vote to send the bill before the Senate for a vote on Saturday. What were your considerations ultimately, and have they been satisfied?
Well, actually, it wasn't any delay. I was just traveling with Vice President Vance. I was with him, so that's why I got there when he got there. But I'm excited to move forward with this bill. I mean, it delivers on President Trump's campaign promises. I spent a lot of time with him on the campaign trail. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, extending the largest tax cut in American history for working families, securing the border, money for the military. There's a lot to like about this bill, and I think we're going to get there at the end of the day today.
Two of your Republican colleagues in Congress have announced that they will not be seeking re-election. Both of them had publicly differed from the president's views at times. What pressure are you feeling from the White House to support the president's agenda?
No pressure at all. I played golf with President Trump on Saturday. We had a great conversation. He's excited. He wants to see this obviously get across the finish line. We're working to make sure that gets done. I mean, he was very clear about, what he wanted to do when he got back in office.
Really pretty fascinating. Just a little while ago today, Elon Musk posted on X about the bill. He called it, quote, the biggest debt increase in history, and he vowed that every member of Congress who supported it, quote, will lose their primary next year if it is the last thing I do on this earth. Your reaction to that, Senator?
I have a ton of respect for Elon Musk. He's a brilliant guy. He did really great work with Doge. I'm actually the senator that will be carrying that rescissions package when we get back after this, which is about $10 billion in wasteful spending with USAID and with NPR and PBS. So I think some of his work will continue on, and I think he's done a lot for the country.
What do you think, though, about him saying that he's going to primary everybody who votes for this?
Like I said, I got a lot of respect for him. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. He's done great work. He's really a great American success story. I'm glad he lent his time to the government. And SpaceX, serving on the Armed Services Committee and also on the Commerce Committee, the commercial space industry in this country, SpaceX was really sort of the pioneer, allows us to really stay ahead of China. If we didn't have that and we didn't have some of the other companies now that enter the market, we'd be in big trouble. So his contributions to the United States, remain unquestioned by me.
At least 1 in 5 people in Missouri depend on Medicaid, as you know, for health coverage, and voters there approved a constitutional amendment to expand Medicaid. Under this bill, more than 200,000 people could lose coverage over the next 10 years. How much does that concern you?
Well, I'm glad you asked the question, because there's been a lot of misinformation about this. The only people who are going to lose their coverage are illegal immigrants. There's 1.4 million of them in this country that receive Medicaid benefits. And if we have the work requirement, which we should have, if you're able-bodied, you should have a work requirement. If you're able-bodied adult. And so if you are working 40 hours a month or volunteering 40 hours a month, you'll keep that coverage. My concern, honestly, is to make sure we strengthen the system for those who need it most, the most vulnerable. I've got a provision here worth billions to make sure we clear the waiting list for individuals with disabilities and make sure they get the services that they deserve. So let's strengthen that safety net for those who need it most. But I think a lot of the misinformation about who's losing coverage is just political talking points that fall flat.
So another program facing cuts is SNAP food aid. About 1/10 of your state's population depends on that program. The cuts in this bill could end food aid from anywhere from tens of thousands to more than hundreds of thousands of Missourians. What are you telling concerned constituents?
That's not true, that they shouldn't believe the reports like you just issued. Getting to a reasonable cost share of the federal government working with the states on this is long overdue. And so there aren't going to be any cuts. People are going to see those benefits. But we do need reform. There's a lot of waste and there's a lot of fraud, there's a lot of abuse in this bill, that we're cutting out in this bill. And I think it's high time we do it.
So give us your prediction. You think that we're going to see the vote in the wee hours of the morning? You think that it's going to get 51 votes in order to pass the Senate?
I think we're going to pass it, but, as a baseball fan, I don't know what inning we're in, Lindsay. Maybe we're in the bottom of the third right now as we're live, but I think we're going to get there and ultimately score a big win for the American people.
All right, Senator Schmitt, we thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Yep.
Jury deliberations are underway in the Sean Diddy Combs racketeering and sex trafficking trial. 8 male and 4 female jurors have already sent back several notes. ABC's chief investigative correspondent Aaron Katersky reports once again from the courthouse.
Tonight, a potential snag as the jury begins deciding the racketeering and sex trafficking charges against Sean Combs. An hour into deliberations, the foreperson sent a note saying they were concerned one of the jurors cannot follow your honor's instructions. That juror is a 51-year-old scientist with a doctorate in molecular biology. The note did not make clear what the issue was, and the judge sent back a note of his own, telling the jury to follow his instructions and return to deliberations. The 8 men and 4 women are deciding whether Combs ran a criminal enterprise with employees who prosecutors said serviced the defendant's every desire through a methodical pattern of violence, coercion, and manipulation, procured drugs, and stocked hotel rooms with baby oil and lubricant. Combs has denied all the charges, and the defense argued his employees were simply buying items for a celebrity boss, telling the jury, I don't expect that we're going to see Beyonce in CVS. The jurors are now deciding 5 criminal counts. When there's a verdict, they'll fill out this form and deliver it to the judge.
And Aaron Katersky joins us now once again from outside the courthouse. Aaron, we know there was another note sent by the jury today. Explain what that said.
There was another note. This one asked about the drug allegations, Lindsay, that underpin the racketeering conspiracy charge. And Sean Combs and his attorneys looked stricken when they started reading the note. We don't know why, but one of the reasons may be that jurors on that verdict form that you saw were instructed to only consider the predicate acts if they decided that Combs is guilty of the racketeering conspiracy. We're only reading tea leaves. We don't know. The jury went home after about 5.5 hours of deliberations, and they'll be back at it here again tomorrow. Lindsay?
Very interesting there. All right. Aaron Katersky, our thanks to you. Now let's bring in ABC News legal contributor Bernarda Villalona. Bernarda, thanks so much for joining us. Okay. The note that we heard, as far as the juror saying he couldn't follow instructions, it sounds very much like what a teacher would send home to a parent about their child. This is a very intelligent man based on his occupation. Help us understand what you make of that he can't follow instructions.
So what I want to know, is it an ability to not follow instructions, or is it a decision that he is making not to follow the instructions?
Right.
Exactly. So are we dealing with a wild card here? Are we dealing with a rogue jury here? That's the concern I have. I will be concerned for the prosecutor, because in the sense of the prosecutor's thinking, could this be a mistrial? Or even if it's not a mistrial, there's a conviction, this is grounds for an appeal for the defense. So I will be concerned in that regard. But we fast forward a few hours later, and the next couple of notes that came out is one, the jury said that they want to leave at 5 p.m., but also another note asking for clarification having to deal with the distribution. So that will lead me to believe that that juror number 25, has now fell in line and is now following the instructions and is now talking to the other jurors and is cooperating in terms of deliberating with the other jurors.
And what do you make of that drug allegations in the racketeering? As we just heard from Aaron, kind of sounds like reading the tea leaves. I would be toward a conviction.
I would be concerned if I was Sean Combs' defense team, because again, if the jury is asking if an individual asks for a controlled substance and the person hands it over, is it distribution? I would be concerned if I was Sean Combs, because number one, you don't get to that predicate act unless you have already found that there's a racketeering conspiracy, that there is an enterprise, that there is an agreement. And also remember that during the prosecution, the government's closing statements, they said the mere handing of narcotics to someone is enough, is sufficient to find that there is distribution. So I would be concerned if I was the defense. But again, we don't know whether it's one juror asking that question or if it's all 12 of them asking that question. Also to remember that this jury has the jury instructions with them back as they're deliberating, so that they do have a copy of the instruction. So I would be curious to see how is it that the judge answers this question tomorrow morning when the jury returns back to continue deliberations.
Many people trying to look into their crystal balls to figure out when this verdict may come. Just kind of walk us through the considerations that these jurors do have to determine.
So, as you know, it's been 6-7 weeks of testimony, over 34 witnesses. 34 witnesses actually testified, and there were hours and hours of closing arguments. And there are issues in terms of the 5 charges, that they are complicated charges when you're dealing with racketeering conspiracy. But more importantly, when you're dealing with the sex trafficking of Cassie Leslie and Jane, because remember, they were in consensual relationships with Sean Combs. So the jurors may have an issue as to trying to decipher as to whether it was consensual or not, or whether they were coerced, or whether there was force or fraud that was actually used. So it's a lot to consider, and you're dealing with 12 different personalities in this jury that are coming together that have to reach a unanimous verdict as to each of these charges.
All right, Bernard, I will see you back here again tomorrow. Same time, same place. Thanks so much. The Trump administration is threatening Harvard's funding after claiming the university is in violent violation of the Civil Rights Act. A letter sent to Harvard's president details an investigation into anti-Semitism on the campus, which found that the school is in violation of Title VI, which prohibits discrimination based on race, color, or national origin. It's the administration's latest in targeted moves against the university, including freezing grants and attempting to halt international students from enrolling. In a statement, the school condemned the administration's actions and said that it strongly disagrees with the findings. And a dramatic rescue at sea caught on camera. A father dove overboard to rescue his daughter after she fell off of the deck at a Disney cruise. The father treaded water for 10 minutes with his daughter in his arms while he waited for the ship to turn around. A ship rescue crew did retrieve the dad and daughter and return them to the ship with no reported injuries. In a statement, Disney Cruise Line said that the incident highlights the effectiveness of our safety protocols. And coming up, our Jay O'Brien is talking with everyday Americans who are closely watching the Senate tonight as they prepare to vote on President Trump's so-called One Big Beautiful Bill. How could the nearly 1,000-page legislation change their lives?
Do you think the average American understands that there are people behind the language in this bill? People like you?
Yeah, it's no. Is the short answer no.
And later, Sotheby's says it has collected the highest price ever paid for a document signed by President Abraham Lincoln. How much one man paid and why he says he bought it. Welcome back, everyone. As Mary Bruce reported earlier tonight, the Senate is still working through a marathon series of votes on President Trump's so-called One Big Beautiful Bill. His signature legislation that he's demanded be passed out of both chambers of Congress and on his desk by the 4th of July. The mega bill slashes federal programs and will impact the tax bills of millions of Americans. It's been in the headlines for months now, but so many still have questions about the nearly 1,000-page legislation. In tonight's Prime Focus, our Jay O'Brien met some of those people combing through this bill to determine how their lives might change. Here's what they had to tell him.
The bill that Mike and Jason and all the people are working on is going to be, I think, amazing.
It's President Trump's biggest legislative gamble of his second term, his so-called Big Beautiful Bill, putting a laundry list of campaign promises on the line. But beyond the drama on Capitol Hill, we found many average Americans poring over the bill's more than 1,000 pages.
It's definitely going to help our firefighters. Do you feel heard by the politicians who represent you?
No.
Trying to figure out how it could change their lives. That's what Tanya's been doing.
Zoe.
Alongside her loyal service dog, Zoe. Despite living just a state away from D.C. in Virginia, she's never paid attention to politics quite like this before.
Oh, sorry.
12 years ago, Tanya, who asked that we not use her last name, had 2 strokes that put her in this wheelchair.
I went from a normal life to nothing, to being a bother in someone's family room, and I didn't know what to do.
Do you sometimes think about the life you had?
Every day.
Tanya used to describe herself as a workaholic. She now lives off disability, government-subsidized health care, and SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, what used to be called food stamps. A federal initiative administered by each individual state, SNAP gives Tanya about $30 a month. She takes that money here to her local grocery store.
I'm paying with EBT.
To stock up on fresh fruits and vegetables her doctors say she needs to stay well.
Could you afford that diet without SNAP?
Not really, no. Not as healthy. There is not a lot left over in my monthly allowance for anything.
But that GOP mega bill currently cuts roughly $186 billion from agriculture programs over the next decade, most of it coming from SNAP. And for the first time in the program's history, it forces most states to pick up part of the tab for food assistance benefits. Republicans say they're making SNAP more viable and cutting down on waste, but all of it leading to concerns that support for those like Tanya could be squeezed even more.
How closely have you followed this bill?
So, very close at the beginning, and then I stopped because it is so scary.
Had you ever followed a bill that closely before?
No.
Between the 911 calls, like the one that came over the loudspeakers right when we arrived, firefighters here in Englewood, New Jersey, and across the country are also keeping a close eye on Congress. That's because this GOP mega bill includes a key Trump campaign promise: no federal income taxes on tips and overtime. And first responders work a lot of overtime.
Last year I put in about 500 hours of overtime.
500 hours of overtime. Now, what if that overtime wasn't taxed?
It certainly lightens the burden for your family. Pays for things like childcare and some rest, some vacations.
So this is a ladder truck, tower ladder. Each department's a little bit different.
The National Firefighters Union has endorsed the tips and overtime sections of the bill. Matt Caliente is a former firefighter and the organization's New Jersey president. He's also an accountant who does the taxes of some of his fellow first responders.
When they do their tax return at the end of the year, it could be in the thousands of dollars that a firefighter could get more of a refund when they do their taxes, for sure.
The officially titled One Big Beautiful Bill Act is largely about taxes. It makes Trump's 2017 tax cuts permanent, meaning most Americans won't see a major change on their yearly filings, but also won't pay more. The most recent estimate from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office finds the bill will add about $3.3 trillion to the federal deficit over 10 years, largely because of Trump's tax cuts. Some Republican spending hawks pushing to pay for those tax breaks with steeper cuts to programs like Medicaid, health insurance for low-income Americans and those with disabilities. Many Medicaid recipients erupting in protests on Capitol Hill. Ruben Bastel is a lab technician at a New York hospital whose brother is on Medicaid.
He's able to live today because he has Medicaid and health care coverage.
This mega bill could potentially cause an estimated 11.8 million people to lose their Medicaid coverage over the next decade, largely because of new work requirements and significant changes to how states cover their Medicaid costs. Republican leaders say their goal is to crack down on waste, fraud, and abuse in the system.
Eventually, the hospitals are going to have to close their doors.
What is that going to do to patient care in general?
Patient care is definitely going to delay it a lot. Patients won't be able to get treated.
The bill also boosts military spending by $150 billion, including money to kick off the president's Golden Dome missile defense program. Plus, earmarks nearly $50 billion to restart construction of Trump's border wall. But it's another obscure issue that could doom the package's chances in a razor-thin House GOP majority, raising the cap on how much Americans can deduct their state and local taxes from their federal income tax, nicknamed
SALT. The SALT cap.
SALT. It's a make-or-break issue for Republicans from high-tax states like New York and California. But in the outskirts of Philadelphia, it's another tax portion of the bill that's worrying Micah Gold Markell. He's the founder of Solar States, a solar panel company where business has never been better, thanks to green energy tax incentives passed about 3 years ago under President Biden.
This is an American-made solar panel.
Right now, Trump's signature bill gets rid of many of those incentives.
Come on up. Be careful. Don't fall off the roof.
Which Micah warns will lead to less demand and likely force him to let go of half of his 60-person company, some of whom he says voted for the president in this key swing state.
The hardest part of being a business owner is laying people off, hands down. You're sitting there telling them they got to stop their dreams. It's terrible.
Are you worried you're going to have to do that more?
I'm really worried about that. Yeah.
The budget bill largely helps to expedite production for the oil and gas industry. The day before we met, Micah traveled to D.C. to plead with lawmakers to give the same attention to green energy businesses.
I think some think that the jobs are not real. And I don't know, other than to come in front of them and to tell them, I was born in West Philly. This is my job. I don't know what else to say to them. And some of them still look you in the face and they just don't believe you.
Do you think the average American understands that there are people behind the language in this bill? People like you?
Yeah, it's no. Is the short answer no.
Back on Capitol Hill, the political pressure is on. President Trump is watching closely, demanding Republicans stick together and race to pass his mega bill by July 4th. But many Americans looking on too. From this cozy apartment to a firehouse to a warehouse and all the other places across this country where politics becomes about people.
So many will feel it one way or another. Our thanks to Jay O'Brien for that. Coming up, a record number of you say you'll be hitting the roads and taking to the skies this 4th of July week. Did cheap fares this year make that decision easier? And the WNBA going big, expanding into some large American cities. We'll tell you where next. Strong storms are threatening record holiday travel in the east tonight. Millions of people are on alert for lightning, damaging winds, and possible flash flooding. Severe weather is possible on Tuesday along the I-95 corridor from Washington, D.C. to Philadelphia and New York as millions head out for the 4th of July break. Here's Stephanie Ramos.
Tonight, families packing airports and highways, getting a head start on the 4th of July. If you thought last year was busy, AAA says buckle up. 1.3 million more of us will be hitting the road this year than last. Driving the increase? The lowest summer gas prices in more than 4 years, according to AAA. Gas Buddy says the national average is just $3.14 a gallon. And experts say the busiest days to drive are July 2nd, that's Wednesday, and Sunday, July 6th. But it's not all smooth sailing. In Washington County, Maryland this morning, a wind turbine blade slid off a truck, blocking Interstate 70. One person was hurt. And southwest of Savannah Sunday, multiple Amtrak passengers rushed to the hospital with heat exhaustion after being stuck for hours. As always, weather is the X factor. Over the weekend, massive tornadoes tore across the northern plains, and dozens of planes at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport were taken out of service after wind and hailstorms.
Our thanks to Stephanie for that. And it looks like 4th of July travelers will be taking to the skies in record numbers as well. Here's a look at what to expect by the numbers. AAA says a record 5.84 million domestic travelers will fly over the holiday. It could be the busiest 4th of July holiday period in 15 years, according to the FAA. The TSA says it expects to screen 18.5 million travelers between July 1st and July 7th. The agency says the busiest day will be the 6th, with 2.9 million people expected to go through the checkpoints. One possible factor, domestic airfares are about 3% lower this year than last year, averaging $260 round trip, according to Hopper. And add that to the record road travel, and AAA projects an all-time record of 72.2 million people will travel at least 50 miles from home over the holiday. So if you're hitting the road this holiday week, you may want to, of course, as the old adage says, pack some patience and try to have some fun. Coming up, the new drama filled with crime and intrigue with one family at the center of it all. We're talking with actor Jake Weary about his lead role in The Waterfront. But next, the big announcement about a movie sequel some of us have been waiting for decades. A new flu vaccine that's 25% more effective than previous ones. The Detroit Pistons point guard reportedly being investigated for gambling related to NBA games. And a sequel to The Devil Wears Prada has already begun production. So which stars are returning? These stories and more in tonight's rundown. Moderna announced positive results in the latest clinical trials for its mRNA flu vaccine. The company says the shot was 25% more effective than non-mRNA vaccines in adults over the age of 50. Moderna is also developing a combination flu and COVID jab. The company plans to ask the FDA for approval on both shots later this year. The WNBA has big plans to expand, announcing that over the next 5 years, Cleveland, Detroit, and Philadelphia will all join the league. New Toronto and Portland franchises will enter the league next year. WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert says the expansion is a powerful reflection of the league's extraordinary momentum, depth of talent, and the surging demand for women's professional basketball. Over the weekend, the Beehive witnessed some pretty scary moments at Beyoncé's Cowboy Carter tour. The singer was performing the song 16 Carriages when her flying car prop tilted midair. Beyoncé stopped the song as thousands of stunned fans watched from below, but she kept calm and held tight as crews safely lowered her to the ground. And despite it all, she kept the show going. Queen Bee made light of the situation, saying if she fell, she knew her fans would have caught her. An important part of American history just sold to the highest bidder. Billionaire collector Ken Griffin bought a handwritten copy of President Abraham Lincoln's 13th Amendment, the law which ended slavery, for $13.7 million. The president signed the single sheet in 1865. It's one of only 4 surviving copies in private hands. Griffin also nabbed a rare copy of the Emancipation Proclamation for $4.4 million. The 1863 document was also signed by Lincoln. It declared all enslaved people in Confederate states to be freed. According to ESPN sources, Detroit Pistons guard Malik Beasley reportedly is under investigation for gambling related to NBA games. Beasley's attorney says his client has not been charged and he hopes that people reserve judgment. The Pistons say that they're cooperating with the investigation. Beasley was in talks to extend his contract with the team. Those talks are now on hold. A glacial pace for some, nearly 20 years later, a surprise announcement, a sequel to The Devil Wears Prada. It's now in production. The announcement, made on social media by 20th Century Studios, quickly garnered more than 300,000 likes. Anne Hathaway, Meryl Streep, Emily Blunt, and Stanley Tucci are all set to return. Filming will take place in New York and Italy, and the movie is scheduled to debut May 2026. Time tonight for the latest in our series Streamlined, where we take you behind some of the biggest films and TV series hitting screens worldwide. Jake Weary is known for his ability to play complex, often vulnerable and flawed characters. Most popularly in the TNT drama Animal Kingdom, he's now starring in a new Netflix drama called The Waterfront, inspired by true events involving a family fishing and restaurant empire, and exploring just how far the characters will go when their legacy is on the line. Let's take a look.
You don't know this world the way I do, and you need to listen to me.
You need to listen to me. I will do this, but I'm gonna do it my own way. Okay, I am not worried about Porter, and you wouldn't be either if you could just put aside your ego for 2 seconds, Pop.
You're a fool.
At least I'm not you.
Fighting words there. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So what drew you to this role of Kane Buckley?
I mean, it felt so different from the other roles that I've done in the past. I feel like Kane is a little more outward and, wears his heart on his sleeve. He tries to use his charms and his charisma to get by, and I feel like I've always played, more, brooding characters or characters that use their physicality to get what they need. So it's more like cunning versus physical ability.
You've said that filming this was like summer camp.
Yeah.
How so?
It was just a great group of people to be around. I mean, everyone from the cast to the producers to the creators to the crew. Everyone is just so incredible, and it was just instant. It was simpatico from the start. We all really got along well, and we didn't. It was hard to leave. Like, it was really special. It's not often you're put in those environments and you have to kind of pinch yourself. You're like, this is what I get to do. It's my job. So.
And of course, when you're saying it's hard to leave, and talking about the environment, you're referring to, I'm assuming, the cast, but this was shot in North Carolina, and you all actually went there and spent the time there. What did that bring to the show, would you say, by actually being there, spending that time in North Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, you're fully, you're immersed in the culture there. And I think that's always important when you're taking on a new role or a new project, to feel like you're fully, there's full immersion there. You understand how these people think. And, we went on boats with actual fishermen before we started shooting, and, just to get the lingo and to kind of, understand their approach to all this stuff.
This series, of course, centers on the Buckleys, a very powerful family. How would you describe them?
I think these are people that come from privilege, and when their privilege is stripped from them, they will do whatever is necessary to maintain their power. And I think that's where the drama lies, is just seeing these people squirm a little bit when their back's up against the wall.
The show is currently #2 on Netflix's top 10 list, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Do you know when you're working on a project, this is going to really resonate with people? People are going to love it, or
it's so hard
luck
to
of the
tell.
draw?
It's really so hard to tell. I mean, there are some projects where you read the material and it can be so incredible and so profound and unlike anything you've ever read before, and then it comes out and maybe it's not executed the way you thought it would be, and there isn't quite the response that you would hope it had. But and then sometimes it's just. It's kind of lightning in a bottle moments where just everything works and everything makes sense, and those are the moments that are so beautiful, when everything perfectly comes together.